Hey, welcome to another episode of Breaking Protocol from the Razzle Dazzle Show, our ongoing miniseries where we break down key updates and design questions straight from the development of Shade Protocol. These episodes are built around the game's community engagement series, Devs Ask You or DAUs, where Kendall and the team not only show what's changing, but invite fans to shape the journey with them. Today we're diving into another behind-the-scenes look at Shade Protocol's development. This spotlight focuses on how the team is approaching storytelling and world building, and the philosophies guiding Emeria's evolution as a living, breathing world. It poses the question, when world building and storytelling butt heads, which one should win? Be sure to follow us and Little Legendary on our socials and YouTube channel, and be sure to join the Shade Protocol Discord server to follow new DAUs, vote in polls, and share your voice directly with the dev team. Links to everything will be in the description down below, and with all that being said, it's Razzle Dazzle time! A good way to start, I think, for breaking down storytelling and world building, let's start with how the idea that storytelling serves immersion, not the other way around within Shade Protocol.
Yeah, so it's quite a painful thing, because when you're thinking about making a game for in the current climate, when I think games are really exciting, people obsessively skip the story. I think that's just kind of something that's very common in the current state of things. Our attention span is very short, and it's rightly so, right? We're playing a game. This is not really meant to be anything other than this medium, right? So you're meant to have fun. So to be really precise and as concise as I can, our goal is to give players a very immersive story that they don't have to stop. They don't have to lose track of what they're doing in order to ingest what's going on in this world. It's a really beautiful world, and there's a lot going on. So it's important that we respect players' time, and we don't bloat the game by putting like crazy amounts of dialogue or losing ourselves in self-importance and saying, you have to enjoy my story. It's so important. Like that's not really how we want to do things. So there's a couple of things that we do in order to achieve that. Number one is really first a big amount of separation from the real world. That's number one for me. I want to make sure that we're not discussing a lot of the things that are happening in this world. This world, the world of Shade Protocol, has its own problems, and the more you get to experience them, since they're new to you, the more interesting they become, right? If you are constantly hearing about the same things, like let's say in the world of Shade Protocol, people were dealing with rent, and you deal with rent every day, like you kind of know how that problem goes, right? Need money to pay your rent. But if you're dealing with like a completely different problem that you haven't heard before, and you don't know exactly how it's going to play out and its consequences, then you're a little bit more enticed to want to explore that. So that's number one. Distance from this world is really important. Second would be this world is used very often, but it's also sort of rare outside of the development side. So it's diegetic. So we want the experience to be diegetic, which translates to everything that you see, Zura, which is our main character, sees. So a menu should not, for us, right? This is just our philosophy. Our menu should be something that Zura sees, and therefore you're seeing it. So you are kind of having the same experience as she has. So whenever you're looking at the map, she's looking at the map. Whenever you're in the pause menu, she's seeing the pause menu. So maybe it's her own systems check or something like that. Her UI, should be like the way that she knows like how all her systems are working. So why does that matter? Because it makes things flow in a way that's more realistic for the character. So the character, if you get hit and the UI reflects that, then pretty much this is a representation of her status versus something that is just there to notify an all-powerful player outside of the fourth wall of what's going on. So that's really important, and that also translates into how we talk to other characters, right? So if Zura is having conversations with another character, it should be a conversation that's makes sense to her, and by consequence has to make sense to us. But there's things that the characters know that we don't know. How do we get that to the player very quickly without giving you a dissertation or a monologue or an entire novel to read? So that's where world building comes into play. Making sure that we are telling a story through the environment and through the actions of the enemies around you, the actions of the other characters around you. And I think all these things that I'm saying sound very common, like things that games just do.
Right.
It's just not the case. I think if we are very objective, but I'm not, hating on the industry or all, but if you objectively go and look at a bunch of these games that are in the same genre as we are, we're all exploring ways to communicate the story of our game with the least amount of, we'll call it friction, right? This is something that we are constantly exploring, and we haven't gotten it right just yet as an industry. We're getting there, right? But you'll notice games like, for example, Clear Obscure, spectacular game.
Yeah, man.
It conveys all this story, but it's because it's so unique and entertaining and enticing that you want to know more, and then you want to read, and you want to be part of the dialogue, and you want to connect with all those things. But it is a lot of content to consume, right? It is quite a lot. So there's other games that the way they solve it is like item descriptions, or scrolls that you just sit there and read 5 pages of content. That's not how we want to solve it, but that doesn't mean we have the answer, right? We're going to try with environment, with distance, immersion, and diegetic approach to the world, and we'll see if that works. And we think it'll work. We'll think it'll do well.
Yeah, and I want to talk about environmental storytelling. As of recording, we just saw you guys post a specific DAU on backgrounds and stuff like that, and even stuff with like some of the different biomes stuff. Great work by Danny Flexner, by the way. Shout outs to him. Environmental storytelling, how will players learn about the world by being, can you expand a little bit more about it? How is Emeria's history and culture revealed through the level designs and details?
So this is a huge challenge, because I mean, to everyone that's hearing, if you ever want to make a game and you're choosing pixel art as your art, just know that there's so many challenges and benefits, right, of using pixel art. But it's definitely something you have to be very cautious with, and very informed of how this works. And I wasn't when we started this project, so it's definitely a big effort in order to do what Danny does, what all the team does in terms of the animation flow of the character, plus making it look really good in a background that is meant to be, really spectacular. It's very complicated. So of course this takes artistry, and we luckily have a team of people that are just amazing. But conceptually, if I was just kind of cover a little bit of the of how that works, I'll give you an example. We're currently working on a biome that will do a more complex reveal soon enough, but it's obvious that we're going to make a ton of biomes. So this biome is a little bit more in we'll call it in the north, right? You have this snow biome, very beautiful, kind of icy snow, glacier-like biome, and it's not enough to make beautiful snow, right? It's not enough to make beautiful trees. It's not enough to make a beautiful mountain. All those things have to come together in terms of depth, how far things are from the camera. You cannot just scale pixel art. I think that's something that people might not know, that is really good for them to know. If you draw a tree and you take that tree and say, I want to put it further in the back, you can't just like grab it like if it was like a picture
And like shrink it,
shrink it and move it backwards, right? Because each one of those pixels, right, was 1 pixel of size. So now you can't make them smaller. Does it kind of work? Of course. But does it look really bad? It does, right? It looks horrific. So when you're trying to make something of very high quality, you pretty much have to make the assets for the distance, like where they're supposed to be. Do we do a little bit of like, things that we use at certain distance? Of course, there's many tricks. Danny's an expert, our backgrounds guy, but it's not common, right? We try our best to make the assets for the distance, like they're made for the place that they go. If you were to look at something like Hollow Knight, for example, they might have like, one of those like insect kind of like the conch, kind of that the little pieces that they have everywhere. You can scale those at any distance, right? Because you could stretch them out, and they will scale because they're high quality digital art, and they would scale to the distance. And then you could just put a little bit of a fog on top of it, or make it a little bit more blurry, and it'll look like it'll look really unique. It'll look different. Pixel art doesn't truly like to do that, at least not at scale, right? So it takes a lot more effort and care to get that done right. But anyway, I guess where I'm coming from is in order to get the story of the world, right? This place where we are done right, then we have to create not only the beautiful trees and the snow and the mountain and whatnot. We have to layer it correctly in terms of distance. We have to give it good motion, so when you're moving, things feel like they are far away and they're moving in a way that's called parallax. But I think that's very common and people know what that is by now. But also we have to place the story as part of the game without having to tell you anything. So for example, you might see metal underneath all the snow and you might see like a little bit of it and you'll be like, well, what's here? Like this snow is covering something. And you might want to know what that is.
Yeah.
And as you go through, you might see. I'm trying not to spoil too much, but you might go to an area where you see like some huge amount of metal, and you don't know what that is. Or you might see like a very unique and different rock formation, or you might see a glacier and further away, and you want to get to those places.
Right.
And as you go through those, you go like, okay, I mean that's something that happens in this world, right? Like there's snow in this world, but there's going to be something more fantastical about this. So you're going to see when the world is just right and how it's supposed to be in the places that maybe weren't touched by the current situation of the world. And we want to show you how that world operated, right? Like how the world was and how people lived and the environments that people got to enjoy and the beauty that they left behind. But then there's also the other places where you're going to see the effect of the chaos, right? And the things that went wrong. So I'm being like a little short on the explanation in general, but you'll see that being a huge part of how we design the world, trying to place things so that you can look at them and say that right there is obviously X, Y, or Z, or ABC. And I'm very clear that this thing has to do with a part of the story of this area.
I think since you have Danny Flexner, an amazing pixel artist in every right, a great example with his work in the game Elsie by Night Shift Games, my favorite level, the Frozen Tundra, or the Howling Tundra, excuse me. In the background, there is like this frozen fights between like this giant robot and this giant dragon and stuff. And as you progress through this level, that scene comes closer and closer and closer. So like, I have zero doubt that with the talent you have on this game, Danny being among them, this kind of immersion you guys are creating with a Metroidvania 2D side-scroller, right, is going to be fantastic. Now, to counteract that a little bit, how do you avoid overwhelming players with all this lore while still creating that depth that we're talking about?
So here I'm gonna sound like a little preachy, but this is just a personal taste. So I think like the first thing is gonna be keeping to very critical rules and just not deviating. An example would be like I believe that I have a big aversion about like games that the game would start, and then there's a conversation between those two characters. I think I've made this example before with you on another conversation, but some character might walk into like a command room, and they would go like, oh, like status report, and some person would start screaming all these acronyms and and pretty much like telling all this stuff that is just, that for me is the writer saying my story is so important that you have to understand.
Yeah.
Like you have to, because if you don't get this, the game doesn't make sense. I think that is in itself failure, right? That we landed in failure for our studio. This is not for any other studio. For us, we call that failure. We are not allowed to do that. So we don't want to make a game where, we have to do this exposition where we're telling you, oh, there's another kaiju attack with being attacked for 113 years in a row. And, damn that second moon that is causing this. Like nobody speaks like that. Nobody in the universe speaks like that. So therefore it's just dodging that is core. So that also, how do we get there, right? More pragmatically. First, you simplify the words that the characters use in order to explain the problems, right? So in our world, when we say something like we're talking about the Shade Protocol, it's clear enough, even though right now you don't know what it is, that is intentional and that's part of, mystery, and you have to have that in a game. So I'm not saying don't have that. But what I'm saying is, it shouldn't be like somebody's telling you, oh, it's been X years since the last time, this. People either know this or don't care, right? Because they're living the consequences of whatever is the effect in the world. That's what we should talk about, the consequence. So for a character like Zura, her circumstances are way different. She's been pretty much in stasis for a very long time, and she's pretty much a failed experiment. So there's a lot of context she doesn't have, and we use that to inform the player. But we don't do that by sitting them and preaching to her, because it's not how anyone talks, and it's not useful to her at all, right? She doesn't need a history lesson to do the job that she has to do. And to fulfill her role in the world, but there's going to be places where we get to enjoy that. So I guess my summary would be being very good at not creating needless amount of complexity in terms of words, like not coming up with like 20 different things. Like, yeah, we have Elysium and we have the Shade Protocol, but we don't have like a trillion things. Like, there's a bunch of robots and we call them the Bastions. Easy, like what that is. Like you could, okay, that sounds like a place. Great. If it could be that simple, if you could make the world that simple, so that players can easily recognize what we're talking about. Oh, the Shade Protocol is the bad thing, and then the lithium is pretty much the resource of the world, and then the Bastions are the places. You slowly but surely get more immersed in the world, and then you would use that language even with other players if you're just talking to them on a Discord channel, or you're just talking with your friends. It'll be easier to explain. Oh, I just got to Bastion Leah, like that's awesome. Like, or I just finished Bastion Suna. How did you defeat the boss? Like it's much easier for people not to then have to start thinking about more complex story items, or even faction definitions and stuff like that. And last thing I would say on this is, like, especially things like complex acronyms, it's really not needed in order to convey a story. So if you're going to minimize the amount of complex words you have and make things kind of simple language, you can also do that with your backgrounds. You can do that. You can get that done, right? You can make a world that is clear enough so that when you look at those backgrounds and you look at the foreground, when you look at the entire environment, it's already kind of clearly telling you the consequences of the things that have happened in the world. That's kind of what we want to do. We want you to go to a place where you go, oh, this is like a snow biome, and it's beautiful, and there's of course snow and beautiful trees and all that stuff. But look at all the other things that are happening in here, and it just slowly but surely makes sense. You could say, I don't need a pause menu. I don't need 10 pages of lore. I can tell what happened in this place just by looking at it and being mesmerized by the beautiful sunset in this snow biome. And, I'm on top of the mountain. I get to see the environment. I get to see all this area. And I already know what happened. That for us is success.
Shade Protocol continues to be shaped not just by its creators, but by its community. Whether it's refining how story is told or rethinking player immersion, every DAU opens the door to deeper collaboration. Thank you so much, Kendall.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Breaking Protocol from the Razzle Dazzle Show. Want to help shape what Shade Protocol becomes? Join the Shade Protocol Discord server to follow new DAUs, vote in polls, and share your voice with the dev team directly. And if you like this breakdown, then stay tuned for more spotlights and interviews with Kendall right here on the Razzle Dazzle Show. Remember, the future of Emeria is still being written. We'll catch you on the next one.